Welcome to Andy and Ari on 3. I'm still here in Mobile. Ari's traveling. But of course we have to address anytime we have coach on coach social media. I don't know what this is. A fracas? Is this a fight? We haven't heard a response yet, so it's only one-sided right now. But we've got Bret Bielema versus Jim Harbaugh, which can't be contested on the field anymore because Jim Harbaugh is not in college football. So unless Bret Bielema wants to go to the NFL or Jim Harbaugh wants to come back to college, we can't get that. Now, we could get it off the field, which that would be fascinating. Former Iowa defensive lineman Bret Bielema, former Michigan quarterback Jim Harbaugh. But these guys, I think these are two guys that are very resolute in their opinions. And Bret Bielema, when he read, presumably, Ross Dellenger's story about Michigan's defense in its NCAA case involving the Connor Stalions advanced scouting program and Harbaugh and what everybody knew or didn't know, and Michigan's going to dig its heels in and fight. Well, some fans unearthed some old Harbaugh clips, and Bielema had some fun with those. So let's play one of those clips from back when Jim Harbaugh coached the 49ers, so before he became the Michigan coach.
And you always want to be above approach, especially when you're good, because you don't want people to come back and say, oh, they're winning because they're cheating. We want to be above reproach and everything, do everything by the rules. Because if you don't, if you cheat to win, then you've already lost.
So Bielema responds to this video with this tweet. Really? Why did you leave? Was looking forward to playing, but understand why you ran to the NFL. Now, this is funny on a lot of levels because Bielema did not have all that much success against Jim Harbaugh. Now, I think the team that Bret Bielema has coming back this year, I think he'd feel pretty good about how that would fare against one of Jim Harbaugh's teams. But this is okay. Let's get one thing straight. Jim Harbaugh didn't run to the NFL because of the NCAA stuff, because of the Connor Stalions NCAA stuff, or the Cheeseburger Gate NCAA stuff. Jim Harbaugh ran to the NFL because he was always going back to the NFL. He tried to go to the NFL when the Vikings job was open. He interviewed for the Vikings job. He didn't get it. They gave it to Kevin O'Connell. He tried again when the Broncos job was open. They hired Sean Payton. He was always going back to the NFL. Those Michigan fans who tell you, oh, he would have stayed, but Ward Manuel, the athletic director, he just messed that up. No, he was always going back to the NFL. When he got a job, he was taking it. So when the Chargers offered him the job, he took it. If they hadn't offered him the job and no one else had offered him the job in last year's cycle, he would have come back to Michigan. He was always going to the NFL if he got a job. If he didn't get a job, he was going to come back to Michigan, which probably would have been much more entertaining in terms of this NCAA case. But I don't think Bret is being completely upfront here when he said ran to the NFL. Well, first of all, coaches don't run to the NFL. They get called up to the NFL. You have to do something to get hired by an NFL team. And so Harbaugh, having previously been a successful NFL head coach, had a lot more chance of getting an NFL job than, say, your average college coach, most of whom would love to go to the NFL because then they don't have to recruit anymore. Now, was the NCAA going to make Harbaugh's life very difficult if he stayed at Michigan? Oh, yeah. Absolutely. But that's not why he was going to the NFL. He was going to the NFL because he was a good head coach in the NFL before. He got to a Super Bowl. He lost to his brother in the Super Bowl. And he was always going back to the NFL if he could. Now, Bielema found another clip. This one's even funnier. Roll the Judge Judy.
Be honest. Tell the truth. You know, if I want them to tell the truth,
then I have to tell the truth all the time when you're in a leadership position. I mean, Judge Judy, I watch her. I mean, I got 90 episodes of Judge Judy TiVo'd on my TV, and that's what I watch. And one thing about her courtroom is if you lie in Judge Judy's courtroom, it's over.
Now, what if the NCAA says, did you take this recruit out for a cheeseburger when you weren't supposed to be meeting with a recruit? And you say, I don't recall. And then the NCAA says, here's the receipt. Do you recall now? And you say, I don't recall. What would Judge Judy say about that? Bielema's response to that video, by the way, was laughing, crying emoji, football, laughing, crying emoji. I really would like Jim Harbaugh to come back to college football just to play Bret Bielema now, because I would love to see the pregame meeting at midfield. Would they talk to each other? Would they even look at each other? How would the postgame handshake go? It'd be spectacular. Like, we need more of this. We need more of this in college football. And hopefully Bielema is not going to be shy and not going to only do this with guys that aren't in college football anymore that he can't really do anything about. Because, like, Jim Harbaugh can't fire back on the field here because he's in the NFL. But we asked Bielema. We remember we had Bielema on the show last week, and Ari asked him, are you going to be this guy? Because we saw him. He and Shane Beamer got into it at the bowl game. Like, are you going to be the guy who does say this? Because we need this in college football. Like, we need the agitators, the Steve Spurriers, the people who spice it up, who keep it interesting. So here's what Bret Bielema said when Ari asked that.
And anybody who's followed your career all the way back to Wisconsin has known that you have ruffled some feathers from time to time, but you're also unapologetically yourself and one of the bigger personalities in the sport. Have you thought about, what that could mean for Illinois if you were to step in and become one of those personalities who, I'm not saying getting into spats with people, but just like, just being yourself and making headlines, is that good for Illinois? And do you find an emphasis on like, hey, the more you can be you, the better?
I tell our kids every day, there's 3 things every day when you wake up you should do, right? Try to do things the right way, be respectful of everyone, and be the best you. And I tell them, hey, for me, I only know how to be Bret Bielema. I can't be – I have a brother named Barry and a brother named Bart. I can't be either one of them. I could be me, right? I don't try to be somebody else. I try to be the person I am.
We don't want Barry Bielema or Bart Bielema going after other coaches. We'll take Bret Bielema doing it. We'll take it because it makes the sport more interesting. Now, what I love is this topic just never stops. The Connor Stalions topic is the gift that keeps on giving. We talked about this the other day on the show. Every day in the chat, you guys get into this. Like, Connor Stalions' name comes up. Obviously, lately, while we've been talking a lot about Ohio State as Ohio State marched to the national title, it would come up because a Michigan fan would make fun of Ohio State for losing to Michigan. An Ohio State fan would fire back, you guys are a bunch of cheaters, Connor Stalions. And it would just devolve into that in the chat. But it actually doesn't matter what we're talking about. We could be talking about Alabama. We could be talking about Texas Tech. We could be talking about the Mountain West or the MAC title race. And Connor Stalions always came up. Always. Every episode. And it's spectacular because it's politics is what it is. I figured out it is politics. Like, and some people watch politics as their sports. I can't do that. I'm not wired that way. But I realize that some people do, and they've got their team, and then they've got the other team that they hate, their rival, and that's how they view it. And I think the Connor Stalions thing is just like that. It is, you believe one way or the other. You believe that Connor Stalions brazenly violated an NCAA rule, orchestrated an in-person scouting scheme. The rest of the coaches knew about it. It was a massive advantage for Michigan. It's cheating. It was terrible. That's one side. Or you believe he was just this try-hard analyst. The coaches didn't even take him seriously. They got no real advantage out of it. They ended up winning anyway. It didn't really matter. And he's just a scapegoat because Ohio State people are mad about losing to Michigan. and you believe that, and there's no argument that either one side can make to the other that is going to cause anyone to bend or change their mind. It's politics. You will go to your deathbed believing one of these two things. Now, I do think there's a large group, and I think I fall into this group, where we don't really care that much and just find all of this hilarious. And I do think it's going to keep going. It may get less hilarious as it goes through the NCAA case, because, again, Michigan is going to dig its heels in. They're going to fight this all the way. And here's my question. Like, what can the NCAA even do at this point? Can they strip Michigan of the national title? If they do, who cares? Like, what does that even matter? That's banners and signage. Like, winning the national title is on YouTube. We watched it. The rings have been given out. Do you think Michigan fans are going to suddenly throw their national title gear into a fire and be like, well, I don't believe in anything anymore? If the NCAA comes and strips them a title, they don't care. Meanwhile, if the NCAA does nothing, Ohio State fans are going to be like, I can't believe you had all this evidence. You did nothing. And, like, they're going to give Harbaugh a show cause. Who cares? He coaches the Chargers. If things go well with the Chargers, he's never coming back to college football. Like, he's not the youngest guy in the world. He's not coming back. Connor Stalions was never going to coach again anyway. Like, it doesn't really matter going forward. Like, lots of money is going to get spent on this by Michigan, by the NCAA. Nothing will actually be solved. We'll be entertained, I suppose. I think it'll get less entertaining as it goes. But it's funny because I'm looking in the chat now. Jay Grizz, we all know they cheated. Plant that flag. No hammer is ever coming. Laughing my ass off. This is what it devolves into every day. Doesn't matter what we're talking about. Today we're actually talking about it. But it just means we're going to get more of this. And look, if it gets more coach on coach, like I would love if Harbaugh responds to this. Now, Harbaugh, because he doesn't have to recruit anymore, doesn't really have to go on Twitter. So I don't know that we're going to get anything from Harbaugh back at Bielama, but I'll take it, man. It is late January. We have a long, long offseason. I'm ready for whatever they're willing to give us in terms of off-field coaching rivalries, of hatred, of poking fun at each other. Give me all of it. But keep coming back in the chat and keep arguing about this. I am ready for your arguments. Plant that flag. Good stuff says, we beat the Buckeyes. We still have the bragging rights over you, natty or not. That's the rules of the game. And the Ohio State fans are like, who cares? We're the national champions. And the Michigan fans are like, who cares? We were the national champions last year. It's amazing. Plant that flag. Also a Michigan fan. I remember when the NCAA dropped the hammer on Ohio State, but it won't happen to Michigan. Actually, the NCAA did not drop the hammer on Ohio State. They had to sit out the postseason in 2012, which I think they were they went undefeated, but I think they were kind of okay with not having to play like Alabama in that postseason. I don't think that would have gone that well for that particular Ohio State team. So it's okay. That team actually probably is more legendary for going undefeated and being left out. Now, they could have just sat out the Gator Bowl the year before, and then they would have played in the postseason. But that's not really the hammer, I don't think. But we'll see what the NCAA tries to do to Michigan. Do they try to do a bowl ban? Do they try to do anything like that? If they do, it's going to real court. And I'm telling you, the stuff from NCAA court will never hold up in real court. And that's probably what they're afraid of. You know, this is one more example of the NCAA being defanged. But yeah, it will go to real court if they try to do anything. And they're going to have to figure out how to manage this eventually, where you can have rules, where you can enforce rules. But I don't think this is going to be the case that does that. But if it gives us more moments of entertainment, If Bret Bielema wants to keep chirping, again, he says he can only be Bret Bielema. Well, keep being Bret Bielema. Keep this energy with the coaches that you also play against, because that will be fun. And again, we saw it. We saw it on the field with Shane Beamer in South Carolina during the bowl game. So maybe that's Bret Bielema's new role in this new college football universe. And maybe he's more emboldened to do that because he had a very good team last year. They have most of their good players coming back. They could potentially be really good next year. So does that mean we're going to get lots of fun agitator Bret Bielema? Bring it on. And if we can set up a game or even a celebrity boxing match between Bret Bielema and Jim Harbaugh, let's do it. Because this is nothing but entertainment at this point. All right, now we move on to the main thrust of today's show. Ari and I had a great conversation about the 2025 hot seat, which I think is going to be a little bit different this year than it has been in past years. I think last year was an indicator of what is to come rather than an anomaly, and we get back to what used to happen. I think things have changed a little bit, and I think it's because athletic directors are really bad at negotiating with coaches' agents. Let's talk hot seat. Welcome to Andy and Ari on 3. Happy Wednesday. We're here at the Senior Bowl. It's beautiful out here, Ari. It's been a wonderful week so far.
Good temperature, great city, good food, and the first time I was at the USA football stadium.
That's right. University of South Alabama, major Applewhites team,
America,
the Jaguars. Now this is a nice little stadium, and it's been fun watching everybody go through the highest pressure, maybe the most lucrative potential job interview that you'll ever watch in person.
I'm sure the IBM CEO in the 90s had a job interview.
That's true. And probably maybe a little more pressure than this, because it's probably like you're one guy,
less physical.
And there's,
I think
there's like you're one guy, you're playing against another guy, and there's 500 coaches and scouts watching. So it's right up there. Same general aesthetic here.
Yeah, no, but it's a really cool environment, and like it's also really cool to just be around the people that we covered during recruiting, like actually like on the verge of living out their dreams, and it's just is a great place to be. It
is amazing. You were talking about this yesterday when we were interviewing players, and it was like Smile Munden, who is a guy who was a big time recruit, and now we're watching him transition to the NFL after a really good college career. Like, it is really satisfying to see those guys, because you saw them when they were kids and they were babies at that point, and now they are grown-ass men.
Yep.
And this is something that they've thought about probably every day of their life since they were 5 years old, and now they're here.
And it's also a reminder too of, like, if you're a 5-star recruit as a high school senior, how actually close you are to achieving the exact highest point that a football player can get to, which is a draft pick in the NFL draft. So, like, you look at these guys that are 17 and seniors in high school and think, oh, well, these are just kids. Like, it's like they're 3 years away from being men at the top of their industry.
It goes so
it's
fast.
Not as far away as it might feel for even them at the time.
Well, we were talking to somebody we ran into who's been coaching in college, who played in college, and I got to talking to him about my son and his football, and he's like, "Oh, what year is he?" And I was like, 2028, and I was like, "That's so far off." But no, I like On3's rating 2027 players right now.
It's not far off. He's gonna get there, Andy. I've got faith in him. He's got a helicopter dad, so it'll be good.
The thing about it is, like, he's gonna have. I'm gonna have to tell Charles Power and Cody Belair, like, even if you think he deserves any stars, you got to knock one off.
Yeah,
I don't care. Like, do we even do 1 star? Can we do 1 star? Like, if he's a 2-star, make him a 1 star.
I thought it went from like 3-star to like just a profile. Like,
that's pretty much how it goes. Yeah,
I don't know. How
maybe he can be the first 1 star just to keep him humble.
Yeah. Well, if he deserves it, he deserves it.
That's right. I would have been a 0-star. There were no stars back when I played.
Oh, that's right. Was it 2000?
No, we were in the 90s, baby.
No, I'm saying that's when they started.
Yes. 2000 was probably the first time you saw recruiting stars. And, that is a conversation we probably need to get into in the offseason, now that I think about it. How we judge team talent probably needs to change a little bit, because a lot of it is, what were the ratings of your kid, the players on your team coming out of high school. I do feel like, and we do this at On 3, where we have kind of a separate transfer rating that guys like Cody are and Charles are doing, where they are looking at a guy, here's what he was as a recruit, here's where we think he is now based on what he's done so far in his college career. But yeah, we gotta evaluate a little differently now.
Yeah, when you look at like the actual accuracy of those team rankings, although recruiting rankings are imperfect, they're also very reliable when they're done in the
aggregate. They're pretty accurate. Individually they can vary, but in the aggregate they're pretty accurate.
The recruiting rankings, the teams that had the highest average were the teams that were the best, and it's not because the recruiting rankings are always perfect. It's because for every miss there's a hit, and for every lower star player that goes up and there's one that comes down, and it just all kind of the math worked out.
Yeah,
and now. That's going to be an annual conversation. I'm sure we'll have that conversation this summer in terms of how do you actually go into next season knowing, but it's almost going to be like uncharted territory, because the last 10 years, the last 15 years, you could basically look at a set of 8 teams based on that recruiting math formula and say, these are one of the 8 teams here is going to win the national title. And you would have been right every single year. And I think we might get into a point now where there, of course, will be favorites and underdogs, but where you really don't know who's going to win the national championship.
Yeah.
I think that would be a good thing.
It would be a good thing. It's going to be trickier now. And also,
because how do you do it?
Right.
I don't even know. The thing is, we have these rankings for transfers and ratings, and what we do is based and heavily influenced on what they were when they came out of high school, because that's a lot of times the most reliable information that we have. Because if somebody goes to a school and doesn't play very much, all you're really left with when ranking them again is how physically athletic are they, and that's
where you can help yourself in the transfer portal if you've got somebody on your staff who maybe worked at the school where the player was, and that guy was balling out in practice, he's just behind better players, but he can come help us. The information remains king in this world.
But then even is that information accurate? Because if the person's leaving a school, then they're bitter about it. It's hard to we'll do the best that we can. And I think that On 3 is the best place to get that information.
Yeah.
But I'm very curious if in 8 years we go into the offseason and go, who's going to win the national title? I have no idea.
I feel that way this year. I feel that way as we go into the 2025 season. And we're going to talk about Hot Seat 2025. That's our kind of featured topic here today. And a piece of it is, I'm not sure we can predict that as accurately either. I think if we tried to say who's going to win the national title, we can probably give you a list of about 10 teams right now that we could make a case for. But I honestly don't think there's one that's a prohibitive favorite, which I like.
Here's the thing, though, that I think I'm missing in my explanation. We both have Illinois pretty high.
Yes.
Right? We ranked them in the top 10 in our
But do we think they could win 4 playoff games in a row?
Do you think that they could win the national title right now? I think the answer is probably
not, right? But there are some rosters that we have ranked lower that I feel like
they could if they put it together.
Correct.
So that's the thing. It's not who's going to win it, because right now who's going to win it is between 20 blue bloods or 20 big time programs. But are we going to get to a point in college football where a team like this Illinois team that's veteran, that has good players who have come back from a 9-win team, where they actually put it together and have enough to win the national title? To me, it's still very much dependent on how you're recruiting.
Yes.
And I don't know if we'll ever get out of that. But the Indiana run, as wonderful as it was, that wasn't a national championship team. And I think that even during the season when we talked about how good they were, and they were, that wasn't bullshit. But I also never once said, and you can go check tape, that I think they're going to win the national title. It was always, will they make the playoffs?
Right.
And I'm wondering if we'll ever get to a point where those Indiana runs,
where anybody who can make the playoff can win that. See, I don't know that we ever get, because even in the NFL,
because this year it was
the NFL has 14 playoff teams a year, and that there's a significant group of them in the playoffs. There's probably half the teams that make the playoffs can't win the Super Bowl. They just can't win that many games.
I don't even know the stats on this. We're at an NFL event kind of, but how many of the bottom seeds in the NFL playoffs make the Super Bowl? Is it kind of the same deal where they don't do it? Or who's the last time?
The amount of, it's interesting because of the amount of wild card teams that make it to the Super Bowl, it's fairly low, but they have a fairly high winning percentage when they do.
Yeah.
So,
Well, because also too in the NFL, when you have players who are out for 8 games, or like there's things like if
yeah, you get hot. Yeah.
Tua was out for 6 weeks this year, if he would have come back and they would have rattled off some wins, then it's not, it's not always indicative of where in college, if you have your best player out for 6 weeks and you lose 4 times, you're out.
Well,
but in the NFL, there's a bigger probability of making it, even if you drop half your game. So like that's also different.
Well, that feeds into this conversation we're going to have today about the hot seat, because, I was going through these names and I'm thinking this is actually very hard to predict, because we don't know who everybody's going to get out of the portal. We don't know how well they're going to hit. So a lot of times before, you could tell this coach is dead man walking because his roster is just not going to be good enough. But now you can change your fortunes pretty quickly, and all of a sudden everything can be different. Mike Gundy is a guy that I have on the list, and we'll talk about why some of the ones I have listed on the column on 3 are too expensive to fire. But like Mike Gundy's one that I have him on the list because he had a terrible year. The school, the Board of Regents made him take a pay cut, made him change his buyout if he wanted to stay, or they were going to fire him. But I feel like Mike Gundy in these situations, like, was back to the wall when he can revamp the roster, changed out the coordinators. Like, this is when he goes 10-2.
Yeah. So I think what your list was doing is people who need to perform, not people who will be fired.
It's more who's under pressure going into this season.
Yeah, under pressure.
Because I left Dave Aranda off, because I feel like Dave Aranda, who started last season on the hot seat, has coached his way into a place where they're fairly comfortable. They feel like the way they ended last season is something they can continue, and that they can compete for the Big 12 title this year.
The harsh reality of the sport is that just because you're not on Andy's list doesn't mean you can't be
on unfortunately,
November.
yeah. There's
things
life can come at you pretty fast.
If things go off the rail, I mean, hell, we were talking about Hugh Freeze.
Well, right. Well,
in the middle of last year, and like that wasn't somebody that would have made your list a year ago. Like that's
no. So, and he's on the list this year. Yeah. But it's interesting because we're going to have a good test of who read the story and who just saw the graphic. Yeah. Because I've got Billy Napier and Hugh Freeze on this list. If you saw our way too early top 25, you know that we believe Billy Napier and Hugh Freeze are going to perform well enough to not get fired, that they're going to be fine by the end of the season because we think their teams are going to be better. But that doesn't change their circumstances right now going into the season where they've got to get this figured out. But, Ari, pop quiz. I think you may have read the story. You may have read the story already, so you may already know the answer to this.
I've looked at the names. I haven't read the text yet.
Okay. How many power conference jobs opened last year because of coach firing?
It's very low, isn't it? Isn't it like 3?
3.
Yeah.
It was 3. It was Purdue, it was North Carolina, and it was West Virginia. The year before that, do you know how many there were?
Was it in the 20s?
7.
Oh.
The year before that?
I really messed up. 20s?
7.
The year before that, 18.
9.
Oh.
No, you're thinking the whole number. Because remember, let's say 2020 because of firings.
Oh, because of firings.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
So 2021 was a monster year for the coaching carousel. There were 9 jobs that opened because of firings, including some monster jobs like you had Florida LSU, USC, Washington, Miami, all open because of firings.
But then that was also a big year because jobs became open when coaches
Oklahoma's
left
coach went to USC and Notre Dame's coach went to LSU. So you had these other big jobs open up. So I don't think we're going to see another year like that anytime soon. I think this year might look a lot like last year. And last year, as that was going on, I thought, you know what? This revenue share is coming in. I think schools are trying to save some money or make sure they have cash on hand because they need to pay the players now. That was my assumption. The more I look at it, I don't think that's why. I think it's because ADs have gotten so bad at negotiating with agents. The Jimmy Sextons of the world, the Trace Armstrongs of the world, the Clint Dowdles of the world are knocking these ADs in the creek so badly on these negotiations that there are a bunch of buyouts that are simply too huge to even contemplate the idea of firing somebody.
Yeah, and it's interesting because the best jobs in the entire country are still the ones that seem to lack leverage in the negotiation process. Because it's like, well, if you're an A&M situation, or like hell, Florida or Florida State, like what, like Florida State's at least a top 15 job in
Absolutely.
America, right?
Absolutely.
So if you're a top 15 job in America, you should be coming into negotiations from a place of strength, not a place of vulnerability and desperation.
They were coming off a season where they went 13-0.
To me, it doesn't matter, though.
Right. But the circumstances of Mike Norvell's contract now, which Mike Norvell, spoiler alert, is on the too expensive to fire list, even though he went 2-10 last year. The circumstances of his contract are this. Like, you're coming off a 13-0 season where you won the ACC. Now, you lost the Orange Bowl, but you can explain that away. Nick Saban retires, and you are on the short list of Alabama's AD. I don't know that they ever offered Mike Norvell the job. I do know he was one of the people they were looking at, along with Kalen DeBoer. It may have been Kalen DeBoer was the first choice, but FSU is not going to take the chance to lose him.
I wish I got a raise every time someone looked at me.
Well, nobody looks at you like that.
That's true.
That's the problem. Have someone look at you the way Greg Byrne looked at the two potential candidates he was looking at for this job. And yeah, so
why don't they just act like our former employer, which is we're the New York Times. If you want to leave, go for it. We can find somebody else because we're the New York Times.
They never act like that. They don't believe that's a thing. Everybody, if you've got a winner, like, and especially in this case, if Norvell were not coming off that particular season, I think maybe they don't bend over like that. But they did.
Feel like Florida State could all. I mean, I know, like, it's like part of me doesn't believe this, so I'm just like trying to think about this out loud.
Yeah,
it's like if you are a top 15 job in college football, which Florida State unequivocally is.
Yes.
Then you should never be in a place of desperation in the sense of if we lose our coach, we are screwed.
Yeah.
Okay. And I think when you go to the offer table with that mentality of like Mike Norvell is being considered by Alabama, if we lose him, we are effed.
Yeah.
Then you are more likely to sign a deal that lends itself
so
to
you are saying that
buyout.
these ADs need to be more confident and less desperate.
Well, like, what's Mike Norvell going to do? Be like, screw you, Florida State, I'm going to Bama?
Well, he would have to be offered by Bama, and at that point, we didn't know.
And are we sure that he was ever offered by Bama?
We're not.
Sure that when he signed the extension that he could have done that?
We're not.
I mean, make them sweat a little bit. Like, one time I was in Chicago with Britt, my wife, and I was like, she FaceTimed her brother for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, dude, I'm obsessed with this girl. Like, I was like laying it on thick at the time.
You're not married at this point.
Not married. No, we were dating.
Yeah.
And he just looks into the phone. He goes, bro, why don't you just like try to make her chase you? It's like, I always thought about that for like a minute. And it's just like, kind of like, yeah, well, we got married and like, hey, maybe I didn't have to lay it on so thick.
She'd catch you pretty quickly. 2, you had no leverage in that negotiation.
That's right.
You had no leverage whatsoever.
Hey. She might tell you different though, because like, it's not about actually the reality of it.
Ari, I've talked to her about it. I don't think you had any leverage.
No, what I'm saying to her though is like, what if I would have come from a place where she's like, I end up marrying this person? What if I lost them? It's not necessarily what the reality is, even. It's what you believe you are to be.
Yes.
And like, to me, like Florida State is probably higher up on the pantheon of coaching jobs than I was in men. Right? In terms of, a lot of different things, from how much money I made to my physical appearance.
Can we go over the too expensive to fire list?
I think you should go over the whole list because we're 15 minutes into this and we haven't yet.
All right. We'll start. We'll just go by conference. So in the ACC, I've got Brent Pry at Virginia Tech. I've got.
He's opening the file, everyone.
Yeah.
He's opening the file. It's hard to go off memory. We don't want to forget anyone.
Yeah. Well, actually, the coaches on this list would probably prefer I forget them. In the ACC, I've got Brent Pry at Virginia Tech. I've got Troy Taylor at Stanford. And then I've got, in the too expensive to fire category in the ACC, it's more than Mike Norvell.
Yeah, I've got this here. I opened it for you, so it's cleaner.
Pat Narduzzi. I don't know that people realize Pat Narduzzi got a God contract after winning the ACC.
You actually had the nice ability by doing this story to review these buyouts, and I think that you were even stunned. After the 2025 season, you wrote that it was $53.5 million for Norvell at Florida State.
Yeah.
And here it's about $25 million for Pat Narduzzi.
Yes. Pitt doesn't have $25 million. They're not doing anything with Pat Narduzzi. But
it's also too, it's like I'm not like making light at like Mike Norvell and how good he was at his job at the time, or Pat Narduzzi and what he's been able to do at times at Pitt. But like, is Pitt so over a barrel as a place that if they could not live without Pat Narduzzi? Like, that's
how they felt when he won the ACC, and that's when he got this deal.
Yeah.
So they had a terrible 2023 season. 2024, they win the first 7 games, and it's like, okay, no, this is going to be fine. Well, then they lose the last 6 in 2024, and you're like, oh, well, you maybe weren't that different of a team, even though you did change out some coordinators.
Well, here's the other piece of advice, Andy. So you got done with the ACC, and I've interrupted you.
No,
you
that's
go to
fine.
The Big 12, but also too, like, what's the number one criticism of me on the show? I'm too reactionary to everything. Like, I don't know.
Well, you've written about this multiple times, and I tend to agree with you.
Why are we so reactionary to like one accomplishment? And I'm not saying that winning the ACC is not a big deal to Pitt. Of course it is. But also, too, if you're an athletic director, don't you have to have the frame of mind of like, if we're going to give this guy a X number buyout, this has to be a consistent reality. This isn't just a blip. I mean, it's the same thing that happened with Mel Tucker. I mean, that dude got, he didn't end up getting paid, obviously, but like he got a $100 million deal because they won a bunch of games and they didn't even win the conference that year.
Yeah.
And Kenneth Walker was awesome. And it's like, is that enough of a runway for you to be unequivocally sure that person's worthy of that contract?
I don't think most athletic directors understand the concept of replacement value.
But I also wonder too if it's an optics game.
Well,
like,
it's definitely.
Well, like, we did this.
I'll tell you the other piece of it. A lot of these ADs look at it like, I'm not going to be here when this all blows up. It's not my money. So what do I care?
I mean, I guess that means I think you're probably not doing your job to the best ability. I wouldn't want to do that to Shannon's wallet. Would you?
That would be our boss.
Yeah.
No, of course.
I mean,
not. We would want to be responsible stewards of the company's money.
Yeah, we stayed at the Fairfield Inn last night.
We did. It was lovely.
$89.
Yeah.
But like, that's not because I'm trying to be I want the company to succeed. And like, I don't know what my future is going to hold in 10 years from now, but you do the best that you can to service the place that's employing you. So that's like, to me, that's just a messed up viewpoint. So like, I just like, there's so many people. Like, what if I wrote like one really, really good column that went, you know how it is for
it goes viral. Yeah.
But like, you know how it is with us, like we'll write something and, you take 50 dry hacks and every like 5 out of every 50 go big.
Yeah.
And it's like, what if like I got a 25% raise the one time I wrote something that went insane, and then I went back to just being a regular? You're not getting the value. You want to have hit a home run, and then you get to that point. But I feel like guys are getting.
But our industry is a little bit different.
Norvell, I don't want to diminish his accomplishments 2 years ago, but I thought that there was a lot of alarming things about the way he built that team in terms of the longevity,
like not really
of consistent
building out of high school. Yeah.
And like, I'm like just an idiot that lives in Dallas. Like, you're telling me with $55 million on the line, there wasn't somebody like, hey guys, wait a minute. After his team leaves next year, this might not be as fun. Like, I just,
but our industry is very different, Ari. Like, we can't get more money in our jobs. And I think most people are in this position. You can't usually get more money in your job unless there is a legitimate offer out there for you to go somewhere else. But college football is a very different world. Over the weekend, Shane Beamer got an extension that I believe gave him about a $2 million a year raise, and then put 2 more years on his contract. Well, that's real money, and it's great because they just won 9 games. They had a great year. You're expecting big things out of them next year.
I know, but if they go 6, if they start
the
off
last
4
time they went 9-4. They did the same thing and ended up costing them millions of more dollars when they had to fire Will Muschamp. Now, I love Shane Beamer. I hope he coaches there forever. I hope it works out great. But who are you negotiating
against?
What
are we talking about next year if they start off 2-4?
Right.
What are we talking about? Why did they give him that?
But we just named the 3 jobs that opened because of firing. North Carolina, Purdue, West Virginia. UCF opened because Gus Malzahn resigned and did them a favor because they didn't have enough money to fire him. Like, Shane Beamer had a better job than all of the jobs that were open. Who are you bidding against?
Yeah. Well,
but
also,
that's how you get into these buyout situations.
If the scarcity of openings also makes you more likely to avoid, like, it's like kind of a thing of like, well, there's not a lot of jobs open, so we don't have to worry about losing our guy as much. But okay, why don't you go to the Big 12?
Big 12, Scott Satterfield in Cincinnati. And remember the circumstances of Scott Satterfield going to Cincinnati. Things had soured at Louisville. Went back to Shane Beamer, the cycle where Shane Beamer got the South Carolina job. Satterfield had interviewed for it. That kind of blew up in his face at Louisville, and he had to get out of there. So he goes to Cincinnati when Luke Fickell leaves. They happen to be going to the Big 12. The transition to the Big 12 has been very difficult for them. They are 4-14 in conference play under Satterfield. Now, look, the competition level that Satterfield has faced in the Big 12 is tougher than what Fickell faced in the American, what Butch Jones faced in the Big East / American, what Brian Kelly faced in the Big East, what Mark D'Antonio faced in the Big East. That said, Cincinnati is very accustomed to success. This is weird to them. They don't like
Cincinnati
this.
Cincinnati is one of those places where over coaching reigns, they've found success with different people.
Senator Tommy Tuberville is the only person in this century who has not been good at Cincinnati.
Yeah.
Everybody else has.
And we had a theory when I was working with Doug and Bill that like there are certain G5 jobs. Now the world has changed since I was there. That like I felt like Houston was one of those places that always was, had the tools to succeed.
UCF, Cincinnati,
FAU,
yeah,
to a certain extent has had some good runs. Like Cincinnati was certainly on that list. And like again, not a G5 team anymore in a new conference that's pretty competitive week to week.
Yeah.
So it's harder to go 11-1.
And they may wind up learning what West Virginia has learned the hard way is when the competition level goes up, it is just a lot harder
to do it, regardless of where you're located. Because, you also, too, it's like Cincinnati moving up. Like, I feel like when G5 teams or G5 teams, they have this illusion of like, well, once we get to the power level, like we're going to be able to get guys over Ohio State or like SMU. We're going to out-recruit Texas and TCU. And it's like, it takes time and success. And I'm very curious from that standpoint of like SMU, like, are they going to be able to like recruit at a level? Like how many years before you're not a G5 team in everyone's mind?
Yeah.
Like, it's like,
I do feel like if you look at the way Rhett Lashley's recruiting, they are headed that direction.
Yeah.
And I tell you what this does is it makes me appreciate even more the job Kyle Whittingham did at Utah.
Sure.
Because he took them from the Mountain West to the Pac-12 and he made them a really good Pac-12 school. They were not good last year, but they obviously had a lot of quarterback injuries. But I think Utah can be a very competitive program in the Big 12 too. Like, because the Big 12 is not that different from the Pac-12 from a competition standpoint. All right. I'm glad you mentioned your alma mater, Arizona. Because Brent Brennan only in year 2, but I worry about him because this is not
stunk last year.
They were bad last year,
yeah.
Even though they had a lot of good players back. And this is not the AD who hired him. Dave Hickey was let go very quickly after he hired Brent Brennan. Desiree Reed-Francois comes in, and sometimes ADs want to kind of put their own stamp on things. And if things aren't going well, even a place like Arizona where they don't have a ton of money, it might be worth a try. Now,
like Arizona was put in a bad position. But it could have been a lot worse because, like, if Noah Fafita would have left and T-Mac would have left and Takario Davis, who is now at Washington a year later, they had pieces on their team to be very competitive.
And
in the
they
Big 12,
weren't.
They just weren't at all. They weren't even competitive.
That's the thing. T-Mac's gone. Like, what are you going to do now?
And that's probably a top 15 pick, right?
Yes. Yeah, he's a freak. He's a first-round draft pick.
Also, too, it's like, you want to talk about, like, Colorado? Like, Colorado had, 4 transcendent players on their team? At most, I think the receivers were going to look back like LeJontay Wester and stuff. Like in 5 years, we're going to be like, holy shit.
Horns having a good year at the Shrine Bowl, I think.
Like those guys were really good.
Yeah.
But like, you're telling me that you couldn't have won 9 games with Takario Davis, who's like a long rangey DB, with Noah Fafita, who was like breaking freshman passing records and like a top 5 receiver.
Yeah.
Like there were teams that made the playoff that would die for him.
Yeah.
And like you're 4-8. Like that's not. And again, I'm not trying to act like it wasn't tough when you're a coach who, made it to the Fiesta Bowl the year before, bails to Washington and takes a bunch of players and recruits. It's a hard thing to build from, but like that was a pretty stark drop from like, oh, maybe they'll win the Big 12 next year with Jed Fish to like, oh my God, they're back to being U of A again.
Yeah, and that's the problem. Let's move to the too expensive to fire. We think, because we don't know, so we don't actually know what Mike Gundy's new buyout is. That hasn't been publicized yet. He did reportedly take a lower one, along with taking a pay cut. So perhaps it's manageable. It would have been $25 million had they fired him in the standoff that led to him taking the pay cut. I'm guessing he didn't take that huge of a cut on that thing, but this is another year. So you're at least under 20 million, but I think you want to get closer to 10 before you even think about that.
With
Mike Gundy,
made it clear that they're okay to move on.
Yeah.
Which is an uncomfortable place to be. Like that alone, like again, too expensive to fire. It's like, well, now we were making moves a year ago at this time.
Again,
so like
Mike Gundy, this is the type of year he goes 10-2. Like maybe Doug Meacham comes in as the OC, Todd Grantham comes in as the DC. Perhaps that all works out. And
there's pressure now. So like you always say, they come out of nowhere. Do they come out of nowhere when he's under pressure?
That's probably true.
That's a different.
Yeah.
They hope he doesn't come out of nowhere. Like Oklahoma State has been consistent though.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that like the fact that he has been, in his position for as long as he has is an illustration of how consistent and how okay they are with that consistency.
Yeah.
That said, last year was an abject failure.
Yes.
In every way. And then of course the comments that he made didn't really help it either.
No. Well, we've all done that about 1,000 times. So
what? Called somebody a loser?
Made comments that we shouldn't have made.
Yeah. Like the losers who listen to the show. That's kind of what he said.
That is what he
But
said.
I didn't mean that. I love you guys.
He was talking about the losers who pay a salary.
Yeah. Well, they pay our salary.
Yes.
People who,
Yeah.
Like
We do not believe you are losers. We love you, and we appreciate you paying our
need you.
salaries.
Please don't stop
Which
listening.
which
ever.
reminds me,
Yeah.
now would be a great time for you to think about some saucy nugs. Like, you've had Wendy's nugs dipped in sauce, but have you had them covered in sauce? Wendy's new saucy and spicy nugs. Take the nugs you already love and turn them up to 11. Choose between flavors like garlic parmesan, honey barbecue, buffalo, and of course the spicy variations of all three. Or if you're a real heat seeker, try the spicy ghost pepper. I dare you, only on Wendy's signature spicy nugs. Pick a flavor, grab some extra napkins, and prepare to nug like you have never nugged before. For a whole new way to nug, it's got to be Wendy's.
Oh my God, it's almost 2:00 and we have not eaten lunch yet.
It's almost spicy nugs time.
Yeah, we're recording this in advance because I have got to get back to Dallas, and driving through the South at 1 a.m. isn't what I want to do tonight.
Yeah.
But I am starving.
Well, I'm glad that we can bring the saucy nugs to whet your appetite, to get you rolling.
It's always in the middle of the show when I'm hungriest.
That's
Have you
how it
noticed that?
goes. Yeah. Either that or you have to poop. It's one of those two things.
Yeah.
So-
Well, that's at the end of the show.
Let us move to the Big Ten, because this is interesting. Mike Locksley, Maryland. If Locksley has a good year this year, he's fine. The way the Locksley's contract works is they set it up after 2023, where if he won more than 7 games, or in 2022, if he won more than 7 games, it would roll over. He'd get an extra year on it. So in 2023, they go 8-4. He gets signed. That pushes his contract to 2028. They went 4-8 last year. So now it's about a $12 million buyout if things don't go well this year. That is, it's not ideal, but they're a Big Ten school in the year of our Lord 2025.
Mhm.
They can afford that. So Mike Locksley, you got to win. Like, that is, you are under the same, probably
We don't
similar
even
pressure
talk
to Brent
about
Key.
Mike Locksley. Like, that's the thing that's so interesting. It's like, I mean, I don't know in terms of perceived superpowers. Like, I think in theory, Maryland could be awesome, right? Like if Mike Locksley.
But he's been there a long time, and they've never
I know.
truly unlocked the DMV.
So,
They've gotten the occasional really good player from the DMV, and that's
They had like a 4-year run where they got a 5-star to like flip on signing day.
Yeah.
Like every year. The problem with Maryland has been that they've been unable to retain those players. They come and then they leave quickly.
In this particular case, they lost their quarterback to Wisconsin. So, like, you are just going to have
like
to
they
deal
have
with
the
this.
Under Armour money and stuff, don't they? Like, don't they have like that connection to Under
It's
Armour?
not
They're in the DMV. Like, they got cool uniforms to some people. I think they're hideous. I don't know like what, but like, it's still cool if you're from Maryland. Like, that's
Yes.
a really prideful uniform. So like, I've always thought that they should be at least better than
The
a
sales
cellar
pitch
dweller.
for Locksley when he got the job is he will get the good players from this area to stay here and play here. And it's not going to be a superpower, but it is going to be every once in a while, some of these 5 stars will gel together and you will have a special season.
Yeah.
They've had some pretty good ones. They've had a couple of 8-win seasons, but I think he probably is going to have another 7-8 win season to make this thing work. So we'll see where that goes. I don't think it has to be perfect. I think in the new Big Ten, it's going to be hard to win. You're going to take more losses. So we'll see about that one.
Too expensive to fire.
I've got 2 in the too expensive to fire list in the Big Ten. I want you to, one, I'm pretty sure you're going to agree with me on. Lincoln Riley, USC.
My understanding is that he had a 10-year guaranteed contract.
Yes.
I mean, like, I know it wasn't public information. I know people have reported it, but like also too, if you're just a person in the room,
Yeah. But
given where he came from and when he did, like during the Mel Tucker hype, like there's no way he didn't.
Talking to people in the agent community, they all seem to believe that this is a fully guaranteed deal. That
how could it not be?
Yeah, it's
right. Considering the timing of it
so
and where he came from.
3 years in, he's going into year 4. This is year 4. So we are talking about an ungodly amount of money if you wanted to move on from Lincoln Riley.
But he has probably been unsuccessful enough there where it's a rational thought to be like, if they stink this year, you're out.
Right. It's
Like,
it's a new AD. But the thing is, so we're talking about Jimbo Fisher type money. Jimbo Fisher got $77 million when he was fired at Texas A&M. I can't imagine USC spending that.
No, I don't think they will. He is too expensive to. But I'm saying from a merit standpoint, he's already gotten to the place where hot seat is rational.
If he were 6-6 again this year in the regular season and had a quote unquote normal contract, and by normal, I mean a buyout under $30 million, he would be getting fired for that.
No question. And I think it's completely rational to question. Like, I mean, like there's USC people out there that are like mad at us. And it's like, there's like nothing about the team right now. It's not even the losses, man. There's nothing to be excited about. I mean, I guess if you think Hassan Longstreet's going to come as a freshman and light it up. Well, they have the really great quarterback coming in that, like, I mean, it was Malachi Nelson at first. And then, I mean, how many times?
They went 7-5 with Caleb Williams.
I know. I just, like, I don't even know, like, what are you holding on to?
Well, and that's the thing. I think there's some USC fans still holding on, thinking that they'll get this fixed. I think there's some USC fans that are out, but they just don't know how does it end, because it's not like some NFL team's going to swoop in and save you.
Like, I mean, do you actually feel like there's a potential uptick here, or are you out?
I'm not out. It's the same thing I've said about Lincoln Riley all along. He's too young and too smart to let it end this way, to let it go this way. I just cannot fathom.
It keeps getting worse.
I know, but I can't fathom that he doesn't figure it out, because, like, I met this guy when he was 29, 30 years old. He was the OC at East Carolina. Like, he's so smart. So I can't picture it. And they were close in a lot of their losses last year. It wasn't like they were getting blown off the field. They were close against Penn State. Close. That was an overtime game. I know what you're saying. You're about to make a Scott Frost comparison.
I just don't give a shit if it's close.
I know. I get it. You are what your record says you are. But it's very hard for me to see him and see what he did so early as a head coach, because I don't think all of it was because Bob Stoops set him up for success, even though some of it was.
Well, it's the first 2 years, maybe, but then he was there for a while.
Right.
So, yeah.
So it's hard. It's just I don't want to give up on it yet.
The problem with me and Lincoln Riley is that I can't get out of my head what I thought they were going to be.
And you're gonna have to let that go, because they're not.
But that's the scale to which I'm judging him by.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure that's ever going to happen.
So, like, what's success? So you're like, so let's neg the program down, and what do you think it should be then? 9-3.
I don't know, but that's I get it, because you're USC. You're not that far removed. From Pete Carroll dominating the entire sport
during that time.
Yeah.
So, like, my whole idea of USC is,
I know,
it's juggernaut.
And that's the thing. That's what makes this situation so frustrating, I think, for the fans whose teams are in it. Because there is nothing you can do. Because you can hope and hope and hope, and there's nothing you can do about it.
The second you accept that you're a 9-3 program, you become one.
At best. You're talking about a ceiling.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. Like, if 9-3 is good enough.
Right.
You should be outraged by 9-3, let alone 6-6 if you're US. I mean, like, come on, fight on. Like, it was the coolest program.
How do you fight on when they're not going to pay the money and nothing's going to change?
You're trapped. I also understand too, of all the coaching contracts that were offered, like, I thought that was a really
I'm not
good
criticizing the contract.
That was a good contract.
I will not criticize that contract, because that is how you had to get him from Oklahoma. What he had done at Oklahoma suggested that you're going to get what you want, and it just didn't happen.
It's just, and I don't know that it will.
Yeah.
But also at the same time, too, I don't think that USC, as a result of not getting what they want out of Lincoln Riley, should negotiate who they think they should be either. Because when you make that contract, Andy, what are you making it for? Because you're making that contract, that offer, you're luring him from Oklahoma because you want your program to realize its ceiling, which isn't 9-3.
Yeah.
It's 12-0.
You're doing it to win national titles.
Well, year one was their who they are, not whatever this is.
Year one may have been the ceiling of who they are.
I mean, I don't.
That's a scary thought.
No, they're one half away from making the playoff, the 14 field in year one.
All right. I want to lay this scenario out for you. This is another Big Ten coach. I have him in the too expensive to fire category. I want you to tell me if that's true or not. So Luke Fickell is 13-13 in 2 seasons at Wisconsin. It does not seem like it is going well from a personnel standpoint. It doesn't seem like they've upgraded the roster in the way that you would need to upgrade the roster to be competitive in this Big Ten. He is signed through March 2031.
It's electric.
A firing after this season, probably you're talking about $33 million. Now, he has offset language in his contract. So if he went and got another job, then the money the other school or other If he goes to the NFL, the other team pays, comes out of the buyout. That said, are you willing to commit to that level of money with no guarantee that he's going to go get another job immediately?
I also too think that like with coaching moves, Andy, like you're also married to like the idea of a person still.
Mm-hmm.
And by firing him, you have to give up on the dream of what that hire promised. Because if you remember, we were at the Athletic when they fired
I was
Paul Chryst.
I was so excited about the Luke Fickell hire because, and I said this multiple times, and I pretty sure I'm wrong. Maybe Luke Fickell can prove me right eventually, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to be wrong. I said this means Wisconsin is serious.
Yeah,
this means Wisconsin plans to try to compete to win the Big Ten, not the Big Ten West.
So, like, if you're going to ask me, do you think he's too expensive to hire? Like, I'm not
too expensive to fire. Yeah.
Sorry, too expensive to fire. I'm not like intimately familiar with their balance sheet.
But they're in the Big Ten. They have a lot of money.
Wisconsin has surprised us before with the behavior.
Yes, but the Paul Chryst firing that you just mentioned, Paul Chryst is such a nice guy that when they fired him, he's like, I realize you owe me this much, but just shave a couple million off that. That's fine.
That's electric.
Yeah. I mean,
I would not be like
I would never do that. I don't know that Luke Fickell would do that either.
No, I know, but like also too, when they fired him, how they fired him, who they replaced him with, it because like Luke Fickell was a home run.
Yeah, and the problem is like, so Paul Chryst took over a program that was routinely double-digit wins, kept them at double-digit wins for a little bit, then they dropped to slightly above average, then they dropped to average. And when he was fired, they were average.
Now they're average.
They're still average, and it's year 3. Luke Fickell has to turn this around.
I don't know that I'm 1,000% like there's no way he could be fired. If they have a bad year, like I think it's possible. But I think he probably gets 2 more years.
It's so much money. And it's a program I can't imagine spending that. But they
imagine firing them.
They surprised me when they fired Paul Chryst too. But yeah, it's just a strange situation. All right, before we move to the SEC, let's talk a little Prize Picks. Best daily fantasy game in America. Download the app. Use the code STAPLES. Play $5. Get $50 instantly. You got an almost free square in the Super Bowl. Patrick Mahomes, if he throws for 0.5 yards, more than 0.5 yards, you're going to win that square. The way Prize Picks works is you pick at least 2 squares. The more you pick, the higher the potential payout. So, you grab that Patrick Mahomes square. You may want to grab the Saquon Barkley 112.5 rushing yards. That sounds like an enormous amount for an NFL game, but Saquon this year's been unbelievable. Like that's more than the Ashton Genty numbers in college this year.
No, it's not.
No, not more than he gained in those games, but more than his prize. That's true. His Prize Picks numbers were in the 130s and 140s. Yeah,
stands, which is.
It's equivalent. It's basically the NFL equivalent to the Ashton Genty numbers.
But much like Ashton Genty, like Saquon feels like a home run threat every time he touches the ball in a way that NFL like
first play of the NFC Championship, first touch in the NFC Championship game.
I don't remember the NFL. I don't know, but like, did he like come close or set the record for most 50-yard plus touchdown runs this year? He broke so many like long 70-yard touchdowns this year. That's why we got to the rushing record.
I believe he had 0 60-plus yard touchdown runs in the NFL before this season,
and like 6 this year.
I think all of them are this year. Yeah. So, it's fascinating to me. But lots of great Super Bowl squares on Prize Picks, and of course, they got everything else: college basketball, the NBA, the NHL, you name it. Download the Prize Picks app. Use the code STAPLES when you sign up. Play $5, get $50 instantly. All right, Ari, let's go to the SEC. 3 coaches on this list. 2 were on it last year, and they saved their jobs, and they're on it again because it's the SEC. It's hard. But Sam Pittman from Arkansas and Billy Napier from Florida, both on the list again. Let's start with Billy Napier.
Sam Pittman's just like in like purgatory.
He's probably forever in limbo. Yeah. Like if he
how does he get off of it? I feel like every year
win like 9 or 10.
No, but Sam Pittman just does quite enough to be on the hot seat the following year for like 9 years in a row now.
Yeah, so, you have to win but that's Arkansas.
Do you find that to be interesting? Like I don't know.
That's Arkansas. And Arkansas always has quirky buyouts. I mentioned with Bret Bielema that his buyout got me subpoenaed. This one for Sam Pittman. Basically, they owe him 50% of the remaining amount of the contract if his record from 2021 and beyond is below 500. They owe him 75% if his record from 2021 and beyond is above 500. So he is 24-21 since 2021.
Oh, geez.
So
They
he
have
would
to
have to
hope.
go 4-8 for that thing to drop to 50% of the remaining amount.
And that probably won't happen. They're
Yeah.
pretty good.
So
Yeah.
I think if Sam Pittman gets into a bowl game, they're gonna. I mean, they have lots of money. Arkansas, you saw them go get Coach Cal in basketball. Like they
Do
got
have
money.
Walmart money?
They do have Walmart
Yeah.
money. They have Tyson Chicken money. They have
Dude, Tyson Chicken's legit.
Tyson Chicken is how they got John Calipari. So they can afford it if it's the 75% number. If they're 6-6, I think they probably do that because I think they're tired of being in that purgatory. But I just think it's a hard job. I don't know if I realize they put a lot of resources into the program. They have a lot of money. They spend a lot of money, and it's hard to understand that it's a hard job.
Yeah.
When you do that, you just want results, but that may just be where they're at. And then they may just want to get off the plateau. Billy Napier, very interesting situation, very different situation. He saved his job this year. Now, when they said he was coming back, I didn't think he'd done enough to save his job. I was a little surprised, but I also understood that they didn't feel like any of the people they thought would be adequate replacements for Billy Napier would come. So that was your choice. Do you keep Billy Napier, which means you keep DJ Lagway at quarterback and give it another shot? Now, once they made that decision, which was right before the Texas game, at which they lost with a backup quarterback, they go beat LSU, they beat Ole Miss, they beat Florida State, they win the bowl game. All of a sudden, things look much sunnier because the Florida team that beat Ole Miss and LSU can play with anybody next year. They still have that tough schedule. It just flips. They have to go to Miami this year. But that team can beat anybody. The team that got its ass beat by Miami and Texas A&M can lose to everybody.
Yeah.
So who are they? If they are that team they were at the end of the year, Billy Napier is going to be fine.
Yeah.
It's going to be whether they make the playoff
Well,
or
the
not.
question is whether or not you can be that team at the end of the year every game.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
they were that team this year at times. It's whether or not you can
Yeah.
consistently play it.
Yeah, and I think, you go back to the Tennessee game. Like, had DJ Lagway started the Tennessee game, does Florida beat Tennessee?
probably. Was that an overtime game?
It was an overtime
Yeah.
game. So you've got that. The Georgia game. If DJ Lagway doesn't get hurt, Florida has a chance in that game. They had a chance in that game with Aiden Warner playing quarterback.
Right.
So that's the part. If you ask me, do I think Billy Napier gets fired at Florida or is still the coach at Florida in 2026? I think he's still the coach in 2026.
Oh, really? I think that the schedule makes it really difficult.
I think he's going to pull it off. But, and this is where people get mad that I'm putting him on the list, it's still really hard.
Yeah.
He's still got it. Like 7-5 probably won't be enough this time.
It's really hard to go 10-2 against the moderate schedule.
This is a very difficult schedule.
10-2.
I don't think he has to go 10-2.
You said playoff or bust a month ago.
I
you change your
did.
mind on that?
Yeah, I'm softening my stance on that. I think if you have Ole Miss's season from this year, where you're right there.
Yeah.
Because if you do that, it means Lagway's had a good year. And keeping Billy
You get
Napier
one
means
more of
keeping
Lagway, too.
DJ Lagway. Yes. And I think that's the
Like
important
the thing
thing.
with Lagway is that he could be the one-man show if he takes a big sophomore step, like that. Billy Napier's viewed entirely differently because he's got a phenom at quarterback.
Yeah.
Like that to me is always the ace up the sleeve. But I do think too that like being consistently the second half of the year Florida and then also performing well in all of the big games, they can't be blown out. I think that they need to. They need to be.
They have to be competitive.
But
I think they
the
can.
path is there for sure.
I think they can.
For sure.
Which brings us to another guy that we talked about at the end of last year, Hugh Freeze at Auburn. If you look at our way too early top 25, we've got Auburn number 11. We think Hugh Freeze is going to be fine. We think Hugh Freeze is going to win enough games that it is not going to be an issue, and they're going to be better. A lot of the games that were close that they lost because of crippling turnovers, they're not going to commit those. They're going to win some of those, and it's going to be a much different situation in Auburn. The reason he's on the list is if you have a year anything close to this year, you're gone. Auburn is not in a situation with the massive buyout. By Auburn standards, it's very reasonable. They can pull the ripcord if they want.
Yeah, I mean, Auburn, I felt like was in a lot of games, but never had that like second half of the year like renaissance that Florida had. And like my hope for them, in terms of like the upside would be for them to have the Florida Renaissance beginning next year.
Right.
Like starting the year that way.
Yeah.
But if they go 6-6 again with the players they brought in and the investment they made, and you're wasting 2 years of Cam Coleman, you don't get anything out of the 3 quarterbacks you brought in. Like, that's probably just like kind of like
I'm just going based on, okay, the roster's better. When you're terribly unlucky, things tend to bounce, find equilibrium, balance out. So which means you might get a little bit lucky. So if you have a better roster and you get a little bit lucky and you get better quarterback play, which you're going to have a 3-man competition with Jackson Arnold
right there,
and Ashton Daniels and Deuce Knight, like, you should be better. You should be out of the woods. I think they are.
They were good enough to win a lot of games they didn't win last year.
Right. So I
don't think it's as big of a step. Like we said on the last episode, they were the best bad team in the country last year.
Yeah. I think they get out of the woods. But I have to put you Freeze on this list because if this season in 2025 is in any way reminiscent to the 2024 season, that they'll get rid of him. Yeah. Like, and he doesn't have a big upfront number on his buyout. Like, it is equal installments till the end of the contract. It is just a line item at that point. And that's why there's one more name on this list in the SEC, and he's in the way too expensive to fire category. And if you're mad, Kentucky fans, I'm sorry. I don't know what to tell you. Mark Stoops is not going anywhere.
Best job in America.
Best job in America. They could have the same season they had last year, and unless he decides he wants to do something different or he wants to retire and wants to leave bajillions of dollars on the table, he's not going anywhere, and I'll tell you why. So I read through all 7 amendments to his contract and the original contract.
I'm going to put the mic down and just let you cook, pal.
Back in Amendment 3, which was signed in 2017, Kentucky agreed that the liquidated damages clause of the contract, which is what the school pays if they fire the coach without cause, 75% of the remaining amount of the contract due within 60 days of the notice of termination, the full amount. So the last person we saw with a buyout like this was Kevin Sumlin. Kevin Sumlin, when he was at Texas A&M. And it actually did probably save his job for 2 to 3 years because they didn't want to write just a massive, massive check. I think Kevin Sumlin's might have been within 30 days, but it was huge.
I get it.
Yeah. That's right. You don't want to pay cash. You want to mortgage this. So, but Kentucky has agreed to pay cash. And this is where it's different than the John Calipari situation, where I said when they were trying to figure out what they were going to do with John Calipari, this is before he went to Arkansas, and ultimately Kentucky decided to keep him. But had they decided to get rid of him, it would have been a $34 million buyout. But it was equal installments every month through June 2029. That is a much easier number to handle than what Stoops would be, which I think would be about $37.5 million if it were after the 25 season. It was $44 million after the 24 season. Due within 60 days. Like that, you are selling some barrels of bourbon to fund that sucker.
Yeah. The thing with Stoops is that it just kind of feels like from afar that the relationship and the desire and the passion and the happiness is gone. I don't know why, for them, but I still think that he's done a great job there.
Yeah.
I still
he's elevated the program.
Good.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know that he's a person that I wouldn't want to have running my program. It just didn't seem like he was as happy this past year for whatever reason. So, I don't know if that's a crazy thing to say on a podcast, but that's just my perception of just his body language and stuff and the appearances that he's had. So,
I mean, when you're losing, it sucks and you're not happy. I think we might be reading too much into that, but it is weird. Like the guy who was their offensive coordinator a couple of years ago, Liam Cohen. Now he was there for one really good season. Then he went to the Rams. Then he came back. Like Liam Cohen's a head coach in the NFL now.
Yeah, right.
That's crazy.
He did have a very awkward opening statement.
Yeah.
This past week, right? But yeah, no, for sure.
Did you like how I got that GM fired? Was that the opening statement?
I still don't know what that means, by the way.
It's the county that Jacksonville's in.
Oh,
Duval County. Duval. Yeah. So it's such a strange situation because we joke about Kentucky being the best job in the country because they will pay you ungodly amounts of money and not expect you to win national titles.
Yeah, just go win 8 games. You're a hero.
But
if they win 8 games next year, he's a hero again.
That's not enough.
Yeah.
It's not enough anymore.
Not enough to nothing. Yeah, not enough for what? What are you going to do about it?
But it's interesting because you look at Texas A&M, which paid $77 million to buy out Jimbo Fisher. They were going to hire Mark Stoops.
Yeah.
And then their board of regents rebelled because they looked at what they would have to guarantee Mark Stoops, because Mark Stoops is already making about $9 million a year at Kentucky.
Yeah.
He's guaranteed all this money that we just talked about. Like, you would have had to guarantee him exactly what you guaranteed Jimbo Fisher.
Yeah, and they didn't want to do that again.
Yeah.
And rightfully so. And like also Texas A&M keeps coming up with crazy buyout stories, and I think they wanted to avoid that. And I actually think that like rationality and functionality with the contract that they hired Mike Elko is probably a healthy thing to do to try to get the program on the right direction.
Well, I think a lot of
Not to
programs
tear this
should
off into an A&M conversation.
No, but a lot of programs should consider that. And it's like Kentucky, they're not in that position now. And I think, I don't know, you tell me, because we've talked about this from the standpoint of sometimes it forces schools to give coaches time. And like the Billy Napier thing may ultimately work out in Florida's favor, because part of the reason Billy Napier hasn't been fired yet was because last year it would have been $26 million, $13 million of it due up front. That's a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
And when they weren't positively sure they had a replacement they wanted in hand, they were like, you know what, let's try keeping him. We like the quarterback. The quarterback stays if he stays. And that may long-term work out. But the flip side of that is sometimes your buyout is so enormous that where's your motivation to fix it? And this is not just a Mark Stoops conversation. This is a Lincoln Riley conversation. This is a Luke Fickell conversation.
Well, you're not scared.
No, there's no fear whatsoever.
No fear. And sometimes fear is the greatest motivator.
Yeah. I mean, I'm afraid every day. Yeah. I don't know about you.
I'm not afraid every day. I feel pretty good about what we're doing, but I also realize that every time we get a win, that it's an important illustration of what we can do. And I think that's important.
Yeah.
So,
I'm always worried the piano is going to fall on my head. I wonder if that'll ever change.
That makes you good.
That's right. That's right. Well, when next you see us, Ari's going to be back home. I'll be back home. But we have tons more stuff from the Senior Bowl. Folks we've talked to. We're going to have a great interview tomorrow with Ty Robinson of Nebraska, defensive tackle, outgoing, the Vanilla Gorilla.
He's awesome.
And it's kind of an exit interview that scans the Scott Frost era and the Matt Rule era. And I tell you what, if you're a Nebraska fan, you're going to enjoy this a lot, because I think it's going to get you excited about the future.
Yeah, I really, really enjoyed having that conversation. It kind of spanned all different topics of, how big his hands are to what it was like to take in a freshman quarterback under his wing and all that stuff.
How much he benches relative to how much you bench. So we'll have that tomorrow. We'll also have tons of other great interviews from the Senior Bowl later this week and going into next week. So we're doing exit interviews with the guys who were stars in college football. And they're going to tell us about how their experience was in college football with their teams and what to expect next. Talk to you tomorrow.